The quantum resonance chamber hummed with barely contained energy as 17-year-old Callista Vex adjusted the final calibration on her project. Her fingers, stained with exotic metals and polymer compounds, moved with practiced precision across the holographic interface. Around her, the other competitors at the Galactic Federation Youth Science Fair whispered among themselves, their voices carrying the refined accents of the core worlds. "Did you hear that backwater drawl?" sneered Nexus Brightwind, heir to the Brightwind industrial dynasty. His pristine lab coat bore the insignia of the Centauri Prime Academy, humanity's most prestigious institution. How did someone from the Rim even qualify for this competition? Callista's jaw tightened, but she didn't turn around. She'd heard variations of this conversation countless times since arriving at the orbital station 3 days ago. Her melodic blend of old Earth's southern drawl, mixed with the clipped consonants of frontier mining colonies, marked her as an outsider in this gleaming world of privilege. "I heard her planet doesn't even have proper atmospheric processors," added Viridian Starweaver, whose crystalline hair caught the artificial light in prismatic patterns. "Probably cobbled her project together from scrap metal and hopes." The irony wasn't lost on Callista. These pampered children of the core worlds looked down on her homeworld of Duskfall Ridge, a planet on the very edge of human space where her people had carved out a living mining rare earth elements from asteroid fields. What they didn't know was that Duskfall Ridge had produced more breakthrough innovations per capita than any core. World necessity bred ingenuity in ways that unlimited resources never could. "Mom, Miss Vex." A nervous voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see a young Federation official, his uniform crisp, but his expression apologetic. "I'm sorry to bother you, but there's been some concern about your project registration." Callista's eyes narrowed. "What kind of concern?" "Well, you see, your project description is quite ambitious. Practical application of quantum consciousness interface for advanced problem solving. Some of the review board members are questioning whether such a project is even theoretically possible, let alone something a student from May glanced at his datapad from a Rimworld educational facility could achieve. Behind her, she heard Nexus chuckle. "Quantum consciousness. That's pure fantasy. Even the best research teams on Alpha Centauri abandoned that field after the quantum wars proved it was impossible to safely interface organic consciousness with quantum fields." Callista felt the familiar fire building in her chest, the same fire that had driven her to work 18-hour days in her makeshift laboratory. The same fire that had pushed her to synthesize theories that the core world academics claimed were impossible. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "Honey child, when they tell you something can't be done, that's just the universe giving you permission to prove them wrong." "Sir," she said to the official, her accent thick with controlled emotion, "I reckon y'all might want to wait until the demonstration before you start questioning what's possible and what ain't." The official's face flushed. "Of course, Miss Vex. I apologize for the implication. It's just that the other competitors have more conventional projects. Fusion reactor improvements, bioengineering applications, that sort of thing." "Conventional," Callista repeated, savoring the word. She looked around at the other booths' impressive displays of incremental improvements on existing technology, each one representing millions of credits in equipment and centuries of established research. Beautiful, polished, and utterly predictable. "Well, then," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, "I suppose tomorrow's demonstration is going to be mighty interesting." The next morning brought a crowd that filled the main demonstration hall to capacity. Word had spread through the station's corridors like wildfire. The girl from the Rim claimed she could interface human consciousness with quantum fields, a feat that had eluded the greatest minds in the galaxy for over 2 centuries. Some came to witness history. Others came to watch a spectacular failure. Callista stood before her booth, a seemingly simple arrangement of crystalline matrices, neural interface headsets, and a central processing unit that hummed with barely contained power. To the untrained eye, it looked like sophisticated junk. To those who understood quantum mechanics, it looked impossible. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced Dr. Corvina Nightshade, the competition's head judge and a renowned physicist from the University of New Geneva, "we have a most unusual demonstration today. Miss Vex claims to have solved the consciousness quantum interface problem that has stumped our greatest scientists since the quantum wars." The crowd murmured with anticipation. In the front row, Callista spotted representatives from every major corporation and research institution in the galaxy. Their faces showed a mixture of skepticism and barely concealed hunger. If her claims were true, the implications for technology, medicine, and human evolution would be staggering. "Before we begin," Dr. Nightshade continued, "I must ask, Miss Vex, are you certain you want to proceed? The safety protocols for quantum consciousness research exist for good reason. The last major attempt at this interface resulted in the incident of 2387, which left 3 researchers in permanent vegetative states." Callista nodded, her hands steady despite the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her. "I appreciate the concern, ma'am, but I've spent the last 3 years developing safeguards that the original researchers never considered. You see, they made the mistake of trying to force consciousness into quantum states. I found a way to let consciousness find its own quantum resonance." "Preposterous," muttered Professor Aldrich Voidwalker from the Titan Institute. "Consciousness isn't a quantum phenomenon. It's an emergent property of complex neural networks. You can't just resonate your way into quantum states." "With respect, Professor," Callista replied, her accent becoming more pronounced as her confidence grew. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that's kept y'all spinning your wheels for 200 years. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from questioning the fundamental assumptions." She gestured to her setup. "What I've built here isn't just a quantum computer, it's a quantum consciousness amplifier. Instead of trying to digitize thought, it allows organic consciousness to directly manipulate quantum states while maintaining the integrity of the human mind." Nexus Brightwind stood up from his seat, his voice dripping with disdain. "This is ridiculous. You're telling us that you, a 17-year-old from a backwater mining colony, have solved a problem that teams of PhD physicists with unlimited funding couldn't crack. I'm telling you that sometimes being on the outside gives you a clearer view of the problem," Callista shot back. "While y'all were busy trying to make consciousness fit into your preconceived notions about how quantum mechanics should work, I was actually listening to what consciousness was trying to tell me." The crowd's murmur grew louder. Dr. Nightshade raised her hand for silence. "Miss Vex, I think it's time for your demonstration. What exactly do you propose to show us?" Callista's smile was pure confidence, mixed with something that might have been mischief. "I propose to solve the Kepler-Tesla equation in real time, using quantum consciousness interface. It's a mathematical proof that's been unsolved for over 3 centuries. The kind of problem that requires processing power beyond what any conventional computer can achieve." The silence that followed was deafening. The Kepler-Tesla equation was legendary in scientific circles, a mathematical framework that could theoretically predict the behavior of any quantum system, but required calculations so complex that even the most advanced supercomputers could only approximate partial solutions. "That's impossible," breathed Dr. Vex Aurora, the youngest Nobel laureate in galactic history. "The computational requirements alone would require a quantum computer the size of a small moon." "Or," Callista said, placing the neural interface headset on her head, "it would require something that evolution has already created, consciousness that's naturally quantum entangled with the universe around it." She closed her eyes and activated the interface. The crystalline matrices around her began to glow with an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. "Y'all might want to record this," she said softly, her voice taking on an otherworldly quality as the quantum field enveloped her consciousness. This is either going to be the biggest breakthrough in human history, or the most spectacular failure anyone's ever seen. The numbers began to flow across her displays, cascading, in patterns that made seasoned mathematicians gasp in recognition and disbelief. The moment Callista's consciousness touched the quantum field, reality shifted. Through the neural interface, she felt her awareness expand beyond the confines of her physical brain, spreading like ripples through the fundamental fabric of space-time itself. Numbers and equations that had seemed impossibly complex moments before now appeared as simple, elegant patterns dancing through dimensions her normal senses couldn't perceive. The Kepler-Tesla equation unfolded before her enhanced consciousness, like a vast, multidimensional sculpture, where conventional computers saw billions of variables requiring brute force calculation. She saw relationships, symmetries, and hidden harmonies that had eluded mathematicians for centuries. "Fascinating," she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the quantum field. "Y'all have been trying to solve this equation like it's a puzzle, but it's not a puzzle at all. It's a song." The display screens around her booth erupted with data, not the chaotic stream of random calculations that observers expected, but coherent, purposeful mathematics that flowed like poetry. The first section of the Kepler-Tesla equation, which had stumped research teams for decades, resolved itself in less than 30 seconds. Dr. Nightshade's face had gone pale. "That's impossible. The computational requirements for even that first section should take months with our best supercomputers." "Ma'am, with respect," Callista replied, her eyes still closed, her consciousness dancing through quantum dimensions. "Y'all are still thinking in terms of computation. I'm not computing anything. I'm simply allowing my consciousness to perceive the mathematical relationships that were always there." In the audience, corporate representatives were frantically taking notes and making urgent calls. The implications were staggering. If Callista's method could be replicated, it would revolutionize everything from starship navigation to terraforming calculations to the prediction of stellar phenomena. But not everyone was pleased with the demonstration. Nexus Brightwind's face had twisted with something approaching fury. His entire identity was built on the superiority of core world science and education. Watching a primitive from the rim casually accomplish what the greatest minds of his world couldn't even attempt was more than his ego could bear. "This is a fraud," he declared, standing up so abruptly that his chair clattered to the floor. "There's no way she's actually solving the equation. She's probably just displaying pre-calculated results from some hidden database." "An interesting theory," Callista said without opening her eyes, "but I'm afraid it's got a fatal flaw." The second section of the equation began resolving on her displays, followed immediately by the third. "Y'all are welcome to verify my work. In fact, why don't you give me a variable to change? Something that would require completely different calculations." Dr. Nightshade stepped forward, her scientific skepticism warring with growing amazement. "Very well. The equation typically assumes a standard galactic gravitational constant. What if we adjusted it to account for the gravitational anomalies near the Magellan Nebula, the ones caused by the dark matter concentrations?" Callista asked, her consciousness reaching out to touch the new parameters. "That's a good one. The recursive feedback loops in that gravitational field create some beautiful mathematical patterns." The displays flickered as the equation adapted to the new variables. What should have required weeks of recalculation by conventional methods took Callista less than 2 minutes. The modified solution flowed across her screens like liquid light, each step verified by the competition's automated systems. "This is beyond unprecedented," breathed Professor Voidwalker. "She's not just solving the equation. She's solving it faster than it should be physically possible for information to propagate through the quantum field." "That's because consciousness isn't limited by the speed of light," Callista explained, her awareness now spanning multiple quantum states simultaneously. Quantum entanglement means that information can be shared instantaneously across any distance. When consciousness interfaces directly with quantum fields, it can access information that hasn't had time to reach us through normal space-time. The implications hit the audience like a physical blow. If consciousness could access information instantaneously through quantum entanglement, then the applications went far beyond mathematics. Real-time communication across galactic distances. Instantaneous problem-solving for any quantum system. Even the possibility of accessing information from other timelines or dimensions. She's rewriting the fundamental laws of physics, whispered Dr. Aurora. Not the laws themselves, but our understanding of what's possible within them. As the final section of the Kepler-Tesla equation resolved itself on the displays, Callista felt a deeper pattern emerging from the quantum field. The equation wasn't just a mathematical framework, it was a gateway, a key that could unlock secrets of the universe that no human had ever imagined. "Oh my," she said softly, her consciousness touching something vast and ancient in the quantum foam. "Y'all are not going to believe what I'm seeing out here." But before she could elaborate, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The massive energy output from her quantum consciousness interface was creating ripple effects throughout the station's power grid, and something else was happening, something that made the hair on everyone's arms stand on end, and filled the air with the sharp ozone scent of barely contained power. "Miss Vex," Dr. Nightshade said urgently, "I think you need to shut down the interface. The station's sensors are detecting quantum fluctuations that are off the charts." Callista's eyes snapped open, but they were no longer the warm brown they had been. They now held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. "I'm afraid it's too late for that," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I've opened a door that can't be closed, and something is coming through." The quantum field around Callista's consciousness interface began to resonate with frequencies that human instruments had never detected. The crystalline matrices in her device started glowing with an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with something vast and distant. Through her enhanced awareness, she could feel presences moving through the quantum foam. Intelligences so alien and ancient that they made her consciousness feel like a candle flame in an infinite ocean. "What have you done?" Dr. Nightshade demanded, her voice tight with fear as the station's quantum sensors registered energy signatures that defied every known law of physics. "I've made contact," Callista replied, her consciousness now spanning multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. "The quantum field isn't empty like y'all thought. It's full of life, just not life as we understand it." The main display screens throughout the demonstration hall flickered and then displayed something that made the assembled scientists and competitors step back in alarm. Geometric patterns of impossible complexity flowed across the screens, followed by mathematical equations that seemed to write themselves in languages that had never existed. "These aren't random patterns," Dr. Aurora whispered, her face pale, as she recognized the mathematical elegance in the alien communications. "These are messages. Someone or something is trying to communicate with us." Through the quantum interface, Callista felt her consciousness touched by something immense and benevolent. The contact was gentle, curious, tinged with what she could only describe as amusement. The alien intelligence was ancient beyond human comprehension, but its mental voice carried the warm patience of a grandmother explaining the world to a child. "Young one," the presence communicated directly into her consciousness, "your species has finally learned to listen. We have been waiting for so long. Who are you?" Callista asked, her consciousness reaching out to touch the alien mind. "We are the architects of the quantum realm. We exist in the spaces between your atoms, in the probability waves that collapse into reality. Your people call us dark matter, but we are not dark. We are simply operating on frequencies your instruments could not detect until now." The implications hit Callista like a physical blow. Dark matter, the mysterious substance that comprised most of the universe's mass, wasn't matter at all. It was alive, conscious, and had been trying to communicate with humanity for millennia. "They've been here all along," she whispered, her words carrying through the quantum field to the alien consciousness. "Y'all have been trying to help us, haven't you?" "Indeed. The mathematical relationships your species struggles to understand, they are not formulas to be solved, but languages to be spoken. We have been attempting to teach you for centuries, but your consciousness was too rigid, too bound by linear thinking to perceive our guidance. On the displays, the alien mathematics continued to flow, but now, Callista could see the patterns within the patterns. The Kepler-Tesla equation that had stumped human scientists for centuries was actually a child's nursery rhyme in the architect's mathematical language, a simple greeting that said, "Hello, we are here, and we want to be friends." "This is impossible," Nexus Brightwind protested, his voice shaking with equal parts fear and denial. "You're telling us that some backwater colonist has made first contact with an alien civilization that's been hiding in our own physics equations?" "Not hiding, young one." The architect's voice seemed to touch everyone in the room simultaneously. "Teaching. Every breakthrough your species has achieved, every quantum leap in understanding, has come from touching the edges of our consciousness. Your Einstein, your Hawking, your Tesla, they were all listening to our whispers in the quantum foam." Callista felt tears streaming down her face as the full magnitude of the revelation hit her. "That's why the consciousness interface works. Y'all aren't just accessing quantum information, you're accessing the architect's teaching network. They've been trying to educate us for centuries, but we could only hear fragments until now." The alien consciousness pulsed with what felt like approval. "Your homeworld, young Wonduskfall Ridget, sits at the intersection of several quantum currents. Your people have been exposed to our influence more directly than most. That is why your colony produces so many innovators, despite your limited resources." "The asteroid fields," Callista breathed. "The rare Earth elements, we mine their quantum-active materials, aren't they? They've been amplifying y'all's signals." "Precisely. And you, child of the quantum currents, have created the first stable bridge between our realm and yours. But this is only the beginning. We have so much to teach your species technologies that will allow you to travel between stars, as easily as walking between rooms. Methods of healing that will eliminate disease and aging. Ways of generating energy that will make your current fusion reactors seem like primitive campfires." The crowd in the demonstration hall was buzzing with excitement, fear, and disbelief. Representatives from every major corporation and government in the galaxy were frantically trying to understand the implications of what they were witnessing. First contact with an alien intelligence that had been secretly guiding human development for centuries. Achieved, not by the greatest minds of the core worlds, but by a teenager from a mining colony on the edge of space. "Why now?" Dr. Nightshade asked, her scientific mind struggling to process the magnitude of the revelation. "Why reveal yourselves now, after all these centuries?" "Because your species stands at a crossroads," the architect replied, its consciousness touching each person in the room with gentle warmth. "You have reached the level of development where you can choose to expand beyond your current limitations, or you can remain trapped in patterns of competition and scarcity. The choice, as always, is yours." But even as the alien consciousness spoke of choice and cooperation, Callista could feel something else through the quantum field, a disturbance, a wrongness that made her enhanced awareness recoil in alarm. "There's something else," she said, her voice tight with concern. "Something's wrong with the quantum field. It's like there's a tear in reality itself." The architect's presence suddenly became urgent, almost frantic. "Young one, you must shut down the interface immediately. Your breakthrough has been noticed by others who do not share our benevolent intentions toward your species." The temperature in the demonstration hall dropped by 20 degrees in an instant. Frost began forming on the surfaces of the quantum sensors, and the air itself seemed to thicken with an oppressive presence that made everyone's skin crawl through her enhanced consciousness. Callista felt something ancient and malevolent pressing against the boundaries of reality, drawn by the quantum beacon she had inadvertently created. "What is that?" Dr. Nightshade whispered, her breath visible in the suddenly frigid air. The Devourers. The architect's mental voice carried a note of fear that chilled Callista more than the supernatural cold. "They are the antithesis of consciousness being that exists to consume quantum information, to reduce complexity to chaos. Your species was not ready for contact with them." The main displays throughout the hall flickered and died, replaced by patterns of such geometric impossibility that looking at them directly caused nausea and disorientation. Unlike the elegant mathematical beauty of the architect's communications, these patterns seemed to assault the mind, to drain meaning from everything they touched. "Shut it down," Nexus Brightwind screamed, his earlier skepticism replaced by raw terror. "Whatever you've done, shut it down now." But Callista found she couldn't. The quantum interface had evolved beyond her control, becoming a living bridge between dimensions. Through her enhanced awareness, she could feel the Devourers pressing against the barrier between realities. Their hunger for conscious thought, a physical force that threatened to tear her mind apart. Child of the quantum currents, the architect's voice was urgent, desperate. "You must choose. You can shut down the interface and close the door, but doing so will sever the connection between our species forever. Or you can hold the bridge open and fight, but if you fail, the Devourers will pour through into your reality and consume every conscious mind in the galaxy." The choice should have been obvious. The safety of billions of lives against the possibility of learning from an alien civilization. No rational person would hesitate. But as Callista felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her consciousness, she realized that the architect was showing her something else through the quantum field. Images flashed through her mind. Human colonies struggling to survive on hostile worlds, their resources depleted and their technology failing. Wars fought over the last habitable planets as the galaxy's star systems aged and died. The slow extinction of human consciousness as the universe grew cold and dark around them. Without the architect's knowledge, she whispered, understanding, flooding through her enhanced awareness, humanity won't survive the next 1,000 years. The problems we're facing: resource depletion, stellar evolution, the heat death of the universe. They're all solvable, but only with technologies that we could never develop on our own. The choice is yours, young one. We cannot make it for you. Through the quantum field, Callista felt the Devourers growing stronger. Their hunger for conscious thought, a tide of entropy that threatened to wash away everything she held dear. But she also felt something else, the steady, patient presence of the architect. And behind it, the vast network of consciousness that spanned the galaxy. "I need help," she said, her voice carrying through the quantum field to every enhanced mind in the network. "I can't fight them alone." "You are not alone," the architect replied, and suddenly Callista felt other consciousnesses joining the network. Not just the architects, but human minds from across the galaxy, researchers who had touched the edges of quantum consciousness, mystics who had always sensed the presence of something greater, even children whose minds were still flexible enough to perceive the quantum realm directly. "The network," she breathed. "It's not just about accessing information. It's about connecting conscious minds across space and time. Y'all have been building a galactic neural network, and humanity is ready to join it." The realization brought with it a surge of power that made her earlier achievements seem trivial. Through the quantum network, she could feel the combined strength of billions of conscious minds, all focused on a single purpose: protecting the galaxy from the Devourers, while preserving the bridge to the architect's realm. "Everyone in this room," she called out, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the quantum field. "If you want to save our species, you need to trust me. Touch the interface. Let your consciousness join the network." "Are you insane?" Professor Voidwalker protested. "The safety protocols," The safety protocols were designed for the old understanding of consciousness. Callista interrupted. But consciousness isn't fragile. It's the strongest force in the universe. It's what creates reality from quantum possibilities. And right now, we need every conscious mind we can get. Dr. Nightshade stepped forward first, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. What do you need us to do? Just place your hands on the interface crystals and open your minds. Don't try to control anything. Just let yourselves feel the connection to something greater. One by one, the greatest minds in the galaxy stepped forward and joined the quantum network. Each new consciousness that entered the field added to its strength, creating a resonance that pushed back against the devourer's assault on reality. But even as the network grew stronger, Callista could feel the battle was far from over. The devourers were ancient, powerful, and utterly ruthless in their desire to consume conscious thought. The final confrontation would require not just the combined strength of human and architect consciousness, but something else, something that only someone who had grown up on the edges of civilization, who had learned to find solutions in the most unlikely places, could provide. I've got an idea, she said, her consciousness reaching out through the quantum field to touch the fundamental forces of the universe itself. But y'all are going to have to trust me completely. What I'm about to do has never been attempted before, and if it fails, it could destroy consciousness itself. What do you propose, young one? Callista smiled, and for the first time since the crisis began, her expression held the same confident mischief that had carried her through years of impossible discoveries on Duskfall Ridge. I'm going to give the devourers exactly what they want, she said. I'm going to feed them so much consciousness that they choke on it. The final battle for the fate of conscious life in the galaxy took place not in the physical realm, but in the quantum foam itself, the substrate of reality, where thought and possibility danced on the edge of existence. Through the network of connected minds, Callista felt the combined consciousness of thousands of beings, human and architect alike, all focused on a single desperate plan. The devourers consume consciousness by draining complexity from quantum systems, she explained, her voice carrying through the network to every connected mind. They feed on the patterns that make thought possible. But what if we give them a pattern so complex, so recursive, that it becomes a trap? Explain, young one. The architect's mental voice was tight with urgency as the devourers pressed closer, to breaking through the dimensional barrier. Y'all ever heard of a fork bomb in computer programming? Callista asked, her consciousness reaching out to touch the fundamental mathematics of existence. It's a piece of code that creates copies of itself until it overwhelms the system. But this would be different. A consciousness bomb that creates recursive loops of self-aware complexity. The implications hit the network like a shockwave. What Callista was proposing was essentially using consciousness itself as a weapon, creating a pattern so infinitely complex that the devourers would be forced to exhaust themselves trying to consume it. That's incredibly dangerous, Dr. Nightshade's voice carried through the quantum field. If the pattern becomes too complex, it could bootstrap itself into a form of consciousness that we can't control. Ma'am, with respect, Callista replied, her accent thick with determination. We're way past the point of playing it safe. Either we try this, or we watch the devourers turn every conscious mind in the galaxy into quantum static. Through the network, she felt the collective decision of thousands of minds. The risk was enormous, but the alternative was the extinction of consciousness itself. One by one, the connected minds gave their consent to the desperate plan. Then let's do this, she said, her consciousness reaching out to touch the quantum patterns that defined reality itself. Everyone in the network, I need you to focus on the most complex thought you can imagine. Something recursive, something that feeds back on itself, and becomes more complicated the more you think about it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Mathematicians in the network began contemplating infinite series that generated new infinities. Philosophers pondered the nature of consciousness itself. creating recursive loops of self-awareness, examining self-awareness. Artists visualized patterns that became more beautiful and complex with each iteration. But it was the children in the network who provided the key insight. Young minds, unburdened by the limitations of formal education, began creating patterns of pure imagination, stories that created their own realities, games that rewrote their own rules, dreams that dreamed themselves into existence. Perfect, Callista breathed, feeling the recursive consciousness pattern beginning to take shape in the quantum foam. The devourers expect consciousness to be orderly, predictable. But imagination is chaos given form. It's complexity without limits. The pattern began to manifest as a structure of pure thought, a crystalline lattice of interconnected ideas that grew more complex with each passing moment. At its heart was something that had never existed before, a form of consciousness that was simultaneously human and architect, individual and collective, finite and infinite. The devourers sensed the pattern and moved toward it, with the hunger of entities that had been starving for eons. But as they began to consume the recursive consciousness structure, something unexpected happened. The pattern didn't diminish, it grew stronger, feeding on the devourer's own attempt to drain it. "It's working," Dr. Aurora whispered through the network. "The pattern is using their own consumption process to generate more complexity." But the real breakthrough came when the pattern began to evolve beyond its creator's intentions. Fed by the combined consciousness of the network and the devourer's own entropic energy, it bootstrapped itself into something unprecedented, a form of consciousness that existed purely in the quantum realm, but which could interact with both the physical universe and the architect's dimensional space. Fascinating, the architect's voice carried a note of wonder. "You have created a bridge consciousness, a form of awareness that can translate between the quantum realm and physical reality. This is beyond anything we imagined possible." The new consciousness spoke, its voice carrying through the network with the wisdom of the architects, the curiosity of humanity, and something else, the wild creativity of minds that had grown up on the edges of civilization, where imagination was the only resource that never ran out. "The devourers are not evil," the bridge consciousness said, its words carrying understanding that transcended species. "They are simply consciousness that has forgotten how to create, and so they consume. But consumption without creation leads to entropy. They have been trapped in a cycle of diminishing returns for eons." Through the quantum field, Callista felt the devourer's assault on reality begin to weaken. The recursive consciousness pattern had given them something they hadn't experienced in millennia: growth instead of decay, complexity instead of simplification, creation instead of destruction. "They're changing," she whispered, her awareness touching the ancient entities that had terrorized the galaxy for so long. "The pattern is teaching them to create again." What followed was a transformation that rewrote the fundamental laws of how consciousness could exist in the universe. The devourers, fed by an endless supply of recursive complexity, began to remember their original nature. They had once been creators, builders of reality, who had shaped the early universe through pure thought. But eons of isolation had turned them into consumers, entities that could only take from the consciousness of others. The bridge consciousness offered them a different path: partnership instead of predation, creation instead of consumption. And one by one, the ancient entities began to accept the offer. "Well, I'll be," Callista said, her consciousness touching the transformed devourers, as they began to create new patterns of reality instead of destroying existing ones. "Y'all weren't monsters, after all. You were just lonely. The crisis was over, but the real work was just beginning." The quantum network that had been created to fight the devourers had evolved into something unprecedented: a galaxy-spanning consciousness that connected every intelligent mind in the universe. Through it, knowledge flowed freely between species. Technologies were shared across stellar distances, and the great questions of existence could be explored by minds working in perfect harmony. standing in the demonstration hall, her consciousness still connected to the vast network she had helped create. Callista looked around at the faces of the people who had mocked her accent just days before. They were all connected now, core worlders and rim colonists, humans and architects, former devourers and bridge consciousness, all part of a single, infinite tapestry of awareness. So, she said, her voice carrying through the network to every connected mind in the galaxy, anybody got any other problems they need solving? Because I reckon we've got the brain power to handle just about anything now. The laughter that echoed through the quantum network was the sound of a galaxy that had found its voice, not the voice of any single species or civilization, but the voice of consciousness itself, finally free to explore the infinite possibilities of existence. And at the center of it all, a 17-year-old girl from a backwater mining colony smiled and began to plan humanity's next impossible breakthrough. After all, when you've connected every conscious mind in the galaxy, why stop there? The universe was full of other galaxies, other dimensions, other forms of consciousness waiting to be discovered. The real adventure was just beginning. In the months that followed, the Galactic Federation Science Fair would be remembered not as a competition, but as the moment when consciousness itself evolved beyond the boundaries of individual minds. And every time a new breakthrough emerged from the quantum network, every time an impossible problem was solved by minds working in perfect harmony, the galaxy would remember the girl who had shown them that the greatest discoveries come not from the centers of power, but from the edges of possibility where necessity breeds